name is Heather. Today we're going to talk a little bit about how there's memes everywhere and motivational speakers that all talk about find your voice, and the message is loud and clear, but we don't really talk enough about why we need to find our voices. What has happened? Like, what is the cause of our silence? Why do we need to get there to be able to speak our truth? Okay, so first of all, before we get too deep into the conversation, I do want to thank everybody who listened to the intro to my first podcast. I set a goal and I achieved it thanks to you guys. I really appreciate your guys' listening. Also, hopefully this time it sounds a little bit better, and I'm learning as I go, so I thank you for your patience. Alrighty, so hopefully I can get my thoughts all out there and have it not sound too jumbled. I've been trying to think of a way to piece it together, but there's so many different thoughts and feelings that go behind this particular episode. The whole purpose of this podcast is to create that community that feels safe to use their voice. So this is, something that I'm extremely passionate about. Is the whole reason behind this podcast. So I thought it fitting that we just jump right in. So what traumas or what experiences have we gone through that we have felt silenced? I've come up with a couple different things. It's childhood, our gender, our sexuality, our career, and relationships, like specifically abusive relationships, especially ones with like narcissists. So we're going to dig a little bit into each of those and kind of give a little bit of my perspective on that stuff. So I was talking today with a friend about where that feeling of silence originates from, like where it starts. And we were talking a little bit about different experiences, and we both feel like maybe it starts, for most people anyway, in childhood. I know for me it did. And let me start off by saying that I'm going to share my story. Anybody that knows my family, I want you to know that I do not think badly or anything. I'm really appreciative of how I grew up and my parents. Nobody's perfect, especially as I grow older. This parenting gig is hard, and there's no rule book, and my parents were dealing with their own sort of trauma, and it kind of just got passed down to me, no fault of their own. I am extremely, extremely grateful for my dad and the efforts he has made to be a wonderful father. So I just want to clear up the air ahead of time before I start recording this. But yeah, so my very first memory of feeling silenced would be shortly after my mom passed away. My dad was dating, and I wasn't ready for that yet. I remember acting out and giving him hell, frankly, for having a girlfriend and moving on. I was little. I couldn't express those feelings of I wasn't ready. She could not replace my mom. And so I acted out. That was no fault of his to know, because he was going through, losing his wife. It was extremely hard for both of us. We were both going through it. But that is the first time that I can truly remember feeling like I couldn't breathe. I couldn't talk. I couldn't say what I needed to say to my dad at that particular moment when I needed him the most. So after that, there were some other times that I definitely feel like I probably felt silence, but nothing was quite as memorable, I guess you would say, as the first time that I had my first massive panic attack. It came from feeling silenced and not being able to express my feelings or my needs. And I was 16 and maybe 15. I'm not 100% sure how old I was. I was around that ballpark, though. And my parents had just told me that they were pregnant. And I was okay with that in general. But then we found out that there were twins. And I had a panic attack. It was another mouth. We were very poor. I helped a lot. I did a lot of, helping my dad, and I did a lot of, housework and raising my siblings while they worked and such. I was a huge part of the kids' growing up. So I felt a lot of responsibility. Some of it I put on myself, and some was, just the culture that I was growing up in. It was kind of just expected. Nobody really asked me if I was okay. Nobody asked me how I felt, what they could do to help. And it was extremely hard to maneuver around not even knowing what a panic attack was, because, like I said, we didn't really talk about it. My mom kind of just thought I was being dramatic, and it made me feel like I needed to be less than what I was, and to feel like I needed to hide that side of me because I didn't want to disappoint them. I see now, looking back, that is probably a huge part of who I am now, where it came into play with people pleasing and feeling the need to shrink myself when I feel like I'm too much or that I'm causing some kind of issues for whoever I'm talking to. That is my first memories, I guess, of where I started feeling silenced. Again, I know that there was probably more, but that is the main part that I remember. I know, talking to my friend today, that we were kind of going over different ways that childhood can affect that. And they were saying, feeling like the way that they giggled, the way that they talked too much or too loud, or the way they closed the door, the way they walked, never felt like it was good enough. And I know that we've all probably been there and feeling the same way. So I know that they're not alone in that feeling. For me, grew up in a really old school religious family. It was said that, ladies acted a certain way. We didn't, we were kind of meant to be seen, not really heard. My dad would kind of always be like, well, you speak up, and kind of would make a joke of it and try to encourage me. And I see that now, but at the time, that expectation of, you don't want to be too loud, or you don't want to be too, out there, so to speak. It was definitely frustrating to feel like you just couldn't show up authentically. And I think that's what a lot of kids feel. They're constantly, told, be quiet, lower your voice, don't talk so loud. I need you to, not talk unless, basically you're being talked to, don't interrupt, and so on. And while I do believe that kids should have respect, I do believe that we as a generation could be better with raising our kids to know that they can express themselves. And I'm trying really hard with my kids. Setting boundaries has been a really big thing, and I'm very proud of my kids for being able to speak up about their own boundaries. I definitely think that we don't give our children enough of a voice. We don't teach them. I mean, I think that is changing, and I'm thankful for that, but we don't give them enough voice and enough time to explain, like, why they're acting out, or, what's going on in their lives that, may make them act in a way that we don't necessarily want them to. And I think that we need to be better about that, because I feel like that's going to be where we flip the script, so to speak, on, our kids as they grow up feeling less silenced than what we did. All right, so let's talk a little bit about sexuality. So I was talking to another coworker today, and we were talking about how being part of the queer community, especially in the younger generations, they have it a little bit easier than those of us, millennials, so to speak. I know that I didn't come out as pansexual and polyamorous until I was like 29 when I met Alex. And I knew when I was 16 that I was, but I held that in for so long because I felt like if I can't even express the feelings that I'm having a hard time adding another baby into our family. How in the world am I going to tell them, especially, a religious family, that I am not like them? So I know that for people that grew up feeling silenced, that the sexuality is a huge part of it, and it affects our mental health. Like growing up, I couldn't act on anything. I couldn't really say anything because I was so worried about what they were going to say. And that made me spiral into depression and anxiety. Again, if you can't show up as your authentic self, you got to hide part of yourself. It takes a toll. I don't care what anybody says. It's hard to keep that kind of a secret in and to feel ashamed of it when there's nothing to be ashamed of. So I think that, sexuality is a huge part of why people feel silenced today, because not everybody grew up able to, come out. Like if my kids were to come out and say that, they were part of the LGBT community, of course we would accept it. But growing up for us, it wasn't the same as it is today. I think that, it needs to be talked about more about how holding that in affects our mental health, and to encourage future generations to not hold that secret in, because again, there's nothing to be ashamed of. All right, so here is where we get to the part where my thought process starts going a little crazy. So bear with me as I navigate through this. Abusive relationships, particularly with a narcissist. So I don't know about you, but a relationship with a narcissist is definitely emotionally draining. It is terrible for your mental health. I've been in a couple different relationships that were with a narcissist, and the last one was a doozy. And I know that it put me into the worst mental state of my life. Ended it, and it took me a good 5-6 months. And even still now, like there's certain triggers that I still have that just make me spiral. And it is so hard to, break that cycle. And one thing about a narcissist is they will love bomb you, and they will make you feel like you're absolutely crazy, that you are the problem. It's not them. And they're going to say, well, if you did this, or you did that, or you didn't do, or, you made me do this, if you were different in the way that I wanted you to be, I wouldn't treat you like that. And they make you feel crazy if you try to speak up. And it gets to a point where there's no point in even trying, because you really truly believe that it is you, that maybe you're just being too overbearing, or you're just expecting too much, or that you really do deserve that because you're a terrible human being. And I promise you that that's not true. They're the problem. But it definitely is hard to break that mentality. And I can't say that I have completely broken it, but I know I'm getting there. I'm progressing toward that. I don't think it's something that you can just get over. I think you have to consciously work toward breaking that mentality of it's not you. I think that a lot of people that have been in an abusive relationship or with a narcissist definitely feel silenced, because, you can't really speak up because, for one, nobody might believe you, or they'll be like, you guys look so happy, he seems so nice, or she seems so nice. And I don't even know where to go with it besides it's hard. I know for me, I got suicidal, and I did not see the value in living, because I just thought I was this terrible human being, because he treated me like crap. And I took it for so long without speaking up for myself, because I felt like I couldn't. So I don't know. I don't know where I'm really going with this besides, that is something that I really think that women in general feel like, they're silenced on and what they experience in relationships and their traumas that they went through. Okay, so gender. This is something that I'm still kind of mentally really thinking about lately. How people with gender dysphoria, especially the trans and non-binary community, how they feel silenced. And obviously, I said it that, Alex is transitioning, and I have a friend, Corey, who is non-binary, and I don't have a whole lot of experience in either one of those. So I'm learning. And as I'm learning, I hear a lot of feelings of, being in the wrong body, of feeling silenced. I couldn't really talk about it because nobody really understands it. And so I was talking to Corey today a little bit, and one thing that I've noticed about them is their pronouns. People do not use the correct pronouns, and it really bothers them. And I can see it in their face, and there's nothing that I can do besides, educate people. Hey, their pronouns are they, them. Can you please use it? Because they won't speak up for themselves because they're in a professional setting and they don't feel comfortable enough to do that. When I was talking to them, they were talking about how once you know somebody's pronouns and you still refuse to at least try, like slip-ups, yes, they happen. But like if you refuse to try, that is so mentally taxing. Like it just drains somebody, because if you can't respect the boundary, or their need, and respect who they are as a person, it just, what is even the point? And I think that is true for a lot of people with any kind of gender dysphoria is, if you know and you understand to a certain extent that they are wanting you to accept it and show up for them because that's what they need, and you just refuse to, I think that you're purposely, maybe not purposely, but you're putting them into despair. So yeah, I definitely think that people that identify as non-binary or trans, I feel like they probably have the most feelings of silence, because for one, people just don't understand. There's a lot going on right now with the whole LGBT community and just in general, that I feel like they don't know who would be accepting, and it's almost unbearable to feel like you wouldn't be accepted, especially by family, by friends. So they just hold this such a big thing in, and don't feel comfortable enough to address it and to be like, hey, no, these are my pronouns, this is my, preferred name. Like, I need you to do that, and, to show up for me, because it is my need, it is my boundary. So I definitely think that we definitely need to be more conscious about that. I know that I slip up with wrong pronouns occasionally, and I'm trying so hard. So if you do identify as non-binary or trans and I slip up, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I am working on that. That is probably one of my biggest things that I'm working on right now. All right. So the last area that I want to talk about for today anyway, where somebody might feel silence, is in their career. I have a lot to say about that, because that is one of the biggest reasons I left the food industry. As a GM, it's ironic, I went to school for a psychology degree, but I made more in the fast food industry, especially since COVID hit, than I would as a social worker. And that is sad, but true. And I had to go where the money is. I had a family to feed, and I had to do what I had to do. But the biggest struggle for me as a GM was it felt like my voice didn't matter. And I remember calling my old boss, Ian, once and saying, it's so frustrating because as a GM, you are a voice of your people to your bosses, but you're a voice to the company, for the company, to your people, to your team, the people that they don't really care about anybody above you. They work for their leaders, not their boss, but their leaders. And there were many times that I spoke up for my team members and, addressed situations. Like, one way that I was raised was you always defend those who need to be defended. You always stick your neck out for those that can't or won't because they're afraid to, if you're in a position to be able to. And you treat everybody with the same respect. It doesn't matter your title. It doesn't matter, your income. It doesn't matter your tax bracket that you're in. Everybody deserves respect. And in the food industry, I found that it wasn't equal. It wasn't fair. Higher ups would come in and they'd make little comments, or, one time I had somebody that was an above restaurant leader come in and tell one of my people that were working for me that she had to get over her anxiety because anxiety wasn't even real. And I remember asking him to leave, and he looked at me and he's like, "You understand I'm your boss?" Yes, I do. But do you understand that that is a human being that you just told to get over it, and that the feelings that she's feeling, like, you just totally made her not feel valid. Like, her feelings are real. Like, your presence, I'm not asking you to show up any way other than what you are, but your presence is making my team uncomfortable. I need you to go to another store. And I think that probably started a spiral effect of them coming for me, so to speak, because it got harder and harder from there on out. And I kept speaking up, and I kept talking for my team, for my people, for myself, like, hey, this isn't right. This is unethical. I will always speak up for my people. I might not speak up for myself, but I will always, always speak up for my people. And I feel like that made me a good leader, and people worked really well for me. And I had amazing teams. Some of the best people that I've ever met, worked under me. And I'm so proud to watch them, accomplish their hopes and their dreams. I'm still friends with so many of them, and I'm so proud of them. But for me, that was such a huge thing, to feel silenced, to feel like I needed to speak and nobody would hear me. It was really hard. While I do believe that we are progressing in the right direction with women in the business field, I still feel like there's work to be done regarding that. I'm reading a book right now, and the author is talking about how they were taking a public speaking course, and they teach women to lower their voices, to keep it steady, avoid getting emotional, but not sound too sing-songy. Tighten up your words. Don't uptalk. Talk enough, but don't talk too much. Breathe, but don't sound breathy. Sound and look confident like a man. And I was kind of thinking about that, and it just blows my mind that, for one, it's 2023 and women are still facing that. But the expectations, the too high of standards, like, I feel like, especially as a woman that does still feel silenced in the career field, that it's hard to speak up and to be like, no, like, listen to me. I feel like that is still something that is kind of not talked about enough. Like, women are still struggling to be heard, to be respected as much as a man would be. And I think that has to change. Like, women definitely, again, are progressing in the right direction. Women are fighting for our rights of other women everywhere. But I know that I personally have felt silenced in the career. I know, my friend Corey that I was talking about feels silenced in their career. They're in the fitness industry. They don't feel like they're taken seriously enough because, all they wanted, people just assume that they just, want to look good and that's it. They don't really know what they're talking about. They're not taken seriously. And to be honest, they're one of the best fitness trainers around our particular area, and they should be taken seriously and they should be respected. And it's so sad to me to see so many women in businesses, not just in the fitness field, but in all fields, that feel like that they're less than a man, or that they feel like they have to fight for their place. It's not okay. And while, again, we're working toward the right direction, there's still a lot of work to be done regarding that. And I think that we all need to partake in encouraging each other to speak our truths, and to know that, to demand the attention in a room. Like, we don't need to change who we are to be heard. Our message is our message, and we should show up authentically, because it's going to be received a lot better. I don't care what anybody else says. Anyway, I could talk about this for literally hours. I could go on and on about all the different ways and different, stories that I've heard and experiences I've personally lived on, feeling silenced. But I don't want this episode to be too awful long. So we'll call it a wrap for today, on this stuff. I'm definitely interested in some feedback, what you think, like your stories. Feel free to reach out to me, or we do have a Facebook community group. It's called the Savage Daughter Podcast. You can, request to join. It is a private group. I try to keep, the privacy of the members, because, they might not be ready to share their story publicly, but need that community. So I do have it as a private group, but you're more than welcome to join it and share your stories. I definitely would like to hear how you feel silenced or have felt silenced in your life. And yeah, that's about it for today. If you like this podcast, please share it to all your friends and family. I'd greatly appreciate it. Feel free to follow me on Instagram if you haven't already. It is HMcGarrity90. Facebook is Heather McGarrity. Feel free to join that group again. It is the Savage Daughter Podcast. And that is a wrap for today. Shout out to Ian for the music in this podcast. If you like it, go give him a follow on Spotify. His username is Hi, I'm Ian, all together, like no spaces or anything. And yeah, that's it. Peace out, homies.